I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, May 7th, 2015. First order of business will be our public hearings, and the first public hearing for this evening will be Chapter 405, Zoning Regulations.
Good evening, everyone. First item we have is a proposed text amendment to Chapter 405, Zoning Regulations, creating Section 405.286, Individual Lot Multifamily Development. I'd like to ask to make part of the public hearing record the municipal code by reference, my planning and zoning report, and the public hearing notice.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on behalf of that tonight? Hearing none, we'll close that public hearing and open up our second public hearing, and that's the Appendix A.
The second item I have tonight is a proposed text amendment to Appendix A, the listing of permitted and conditional uses. As a result of creating the proposed Section 405.286, it will require revising existing Section Appendix A. I'd also like to ask again to make part of the public hearing records the municipal code by reference, my P&Z report, and the public hearing notices.
Thank you, Mr. Hamp. Anyone else to speak on behalf of that public hearing tonight? Hearing none, we'll close our public hearings for this evening and open up our regular planning and zoning meeting. First order of business will be the minutes from our last meeting, April 2nd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from meeting of April 2nd as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Costello, second by Mr. Deach, to approve the minutes as submitted. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Kohler?
Abstain, I was absent.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
I was abstaining, I was absent.
Motion passes 5-0 with 2 abstentions and 3 absent. Next order of business will be the Warren County Fair Association Demo Derby.
This is a special event permit application, SEP 11, for a demo derby, May the 30th, 2015. Per section 405.185, applicants may apply for a special event permit for activities within the OPR, Outdoor Public Recreation Zoning District. On 4/23/15, Paul Owenby, care of the Warren County Fair Board, submitted a special event permit application for a demo derby event to be held at the Warren County Fairgrounds on May the 30th, 2015. And I believe he has a representative here tonight if you have any specific questions.
Do you want to step to the podium and state your name, sir?
And I'm going to leave the dais. I have a business relationship with the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Zach Smith, on behalf of the Warren County Fair Board.
Okay. We'll wait for Mr. Dickey to get it all geared up here and ask some questions for us tonight. You could take the lead on this.
I'm still looking at this 1,000-foot drawing that I can't make much out of. I think we talked about that at another meeting we had, and they were going to put some flat drawings down, but explain this derby. I have never been to one.
Right.
Tell me what it's going to do according to this drawing.
There's a picture right there behind you too if you want to step over to that.
Yeah.
According to
You
this
just got to speak
drawing-
up loud though, okay? Zach? Okay.
According to this drawing, our derby event is usually held from the west end of the stage to this right here. Roughly right in the middle of the grandstand. Your pit is usually 80 foot wide, 150 foot long. And what we will be doing is we will be having a demo derby in this area. You know, cars crashing into each other. It's sort of a sporting event. We have safety barriers will be put in place at the west end of the stage and coming down roughly 60 foot east of the stage. There will be another set of barriers. Cars will be trapped in. No spectators are allowed down there near the pits. Most of your pedestrians, if you will be in the grandstand. We have, after each event, we remove a safety barricade where the cars can either drive out or be carried out with a piece of equipment if they're not running. They will exit the east end of the track, the northeast end, and the pits will be at the east end of the track. We have a gated off area designed just for these pits for the cars and trailers. We will have our kitchen going, which is on the south end of the track, or south side of the track. Restrooms, and then I believe we will also be utilizing the beer garden, which is down at this end here. It's kind of hard to see on the screen. But the general gist of it, we have 4 classes, being a stock car class, which they have different rules that you can build to. Stock car class, a modified class, a mini or a compact car, if you will, class, and then this year we are hosting a Power Wheels class for the kids. It will be entirely separate from the general workings of the big cars for safety reasons. So, after those 4 classes, the event will conclude, and we should not need to go, any later than our permits do allow for, as far as for special permit for noise variance and whatnot. But that's basically the general workings of it. If you guys have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer.
The mud bog that they're putting on here, there was a sanctioning body that's actually doing that. Is there a sanctioning body for this, or?
The Warren County Fair Board is actually the one putting it on. I have a separate crew that is actually doing the inspections of the cars and actually doing, has the officials for the track. It's called Flowers Full Throttle Demolition Derby. And he is doing, basically running the show, but the fair board itself is what's promoting it. He's
Right.
stepping in to help us with manpower, people with experience in the event. So,
Thank you. Still like to see a nice flat drawing, though.
we will work on that, and it's in the works.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else got any questions, comments?
I'll make a motion that we approve the special event permit for the Warren County Fair Demolition Derby on May 30th.
Correct.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Kohler, second by Mr. Dickey to approve the special event permit for this derby event on May the 30th. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Kohler?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
He is
Abstain.
stepped away. So, motion will pass 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Next order of business will be lots 1 and 2, John and Russell Brockville subdivision, boundary adjustment.
This is a proposed boundary adjustment for Lot 1 and Lot 2 of the John and Russell Brockfield subdivision, located at 912 South Highway 47, along with the adjoining 1.7 acres to the north. Property is zoned C2 General Commercial. And your packet has their application. I went to the courthouse and got a copy of the original subdivision plat. You have their submitted plan, my review letter, and then the revised plan, along with the public hearing notices and notification of property owners. And they do have a representative here if you have any specific questions.
So basically their intent is to take 2 lots and make it one? Or, no, they're dividing
Of the
it
two lots,
out.
of the 2 lots that are there, they're making one of the lots bigger.
Oh, okay.
On the original Lot 1, original Lot 1 was 1.75 acres, and they're reducing it to 1 acre. And Tim, would you like to speak?
Sure. I'm Tim Sturholt with Washington Engineering and Architecture, representing Scenic Regional Library. And basically, we're just helping them at this time acquire some property throughout the counties that they serve and the different cities. And this is probably the 3rd one that we're working on. We're just taking care of the surveying, geotechnical, title search type things. And basically, what they are thinking about doing, and really no plans have been made yet, is adding on to their existing library branch, which is on Lot 2, and possibly an 8,000 square foot addition. And then because of the parking requirements, they need more property for additional parking. And that's what the rear half of Lot 1 is for, is basically for additional parking to meet the requirements and their needs, actually. So basically, at that time, that's really all I know about the project.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Is this in a subdivision down there?
No, it's right along the highway, and basically, the library is, I don't know, do you have our additional?
Just slide down 2 more, Randy,
The
please.
the subdivision right behind it is Arrowhead Manor. And it's got about, I'm the president of
Yeah,
Arrowhead
it's not
Manor, and we
really-
got about, give or take, 100 houses in there.
It's,
Is this part of that?
No,
No.
not to my knowledge, no.
no.
Because neither are the duplexes that are right next to it.
Yeah, it faces from Highway 47, it goes back to the existing subdivision behind it, but Lot 2, the southernmost lot is the existing library site, and Lot 1
Yeah.
at this time is just an empty field.
Empty field.
The library's basically up here.
Right in there, yes.
Corner, this is a big slope going up to the subdivision, but basically it's not real buildable to the
Right.
I guess this would be the east. So basically, they're planning a little addition on the back of their building, and then parking
You can see it on there.
go across the existing road easement. We were asking to abandon this road easement, to the point that we're taking the property, just to free up the land. But basically, that's.
Do they own the property now?
Yes.
Why
Yeah,
are
their
they-
existing branch is located there, been there for, I think, about 10 years, I believe.
Give or take.
Well, if there's
The
no other-
original plat is dated May 1997, so, yeah. And then as far as the vacating of that right-of-way, that would be a separate procedure that they could work through the city with,
Okay.
if and when they decide exactly what portion they're wishing to.
Right. At the present
Attempt
time,
to
they don't need to,
vacate.
because
Yeah.
they'll just be parking.
But that wouldn't interfere with your boundary adjustment tonight. They could apply for that separately down the road.
Okay.
If there's no other discussion, I would make a motion to approve the boundary adjustments of lots 1 and 2 of the John and Russell Brockville subdivision.
I'll second it.
Mr. Durbin? Have a motion by Mrs. Scott, second by Mr. Durbin, to approve the lots 1 and 2 of John Russell Brockville subdivision boundary adjustment. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote?
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Kohler?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
I will abstain because I'm on the Library Foundation Board.
Motion passes 6-0 with 1 abstention and 3 absence.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your
Because I
time.
can't read.
Oh. Next order of business will be Chapter 405 zoning regulations.
This is a proposed text amendment to Chapter 405 zoning regulations, creating Section 405.286, individual lot multifamily development. And our city attorney, Mr. Cavill's here if you have any specific questions for him.
I'm assuming that since this came from the city board, that there was a issue that this was specifically trying to address?
Yeah, what we found over you know, we had this huge glut of development and then this gap in development. And as kind of redevelopment started and as people bought up some of the old lots, what we found was that on quite a few of the multifamily attached housing, the duplexes, there were developers that had come in and gotten a single-family lot approved from multifamily development, a duplex, triplex, quadplex, and then they actually, when they sold the property, they then re-subdivided it via meets and bounds. So there's a large number of developments that have that type of re-subdivision that has occurred, that the code, you know, you cannot subdivide below a minimum single-family lot, subdivision lot. Now, we've gone back, and this has taken some time to do the research, and we've looked at how that could have happened, what happened when it got approved, what was represented to the board, what were in the minutes. We watched the video from the meeting, and even spoke to one of the developers that had done these type of developments to try to fully understand how this ever became, because our concern is what happens if a duplex burns down. They've got this re-subdivided lot. It's not approved by the city. It's not a legal subdivided lot, but subsequent to that, a individual or a family has bought that lot thinking they own the ground, the building, which is half a house. So it is pretty prevalent in the city. There's quite a few developments, and Jack can give you the list of some of the developments that have it in there. Some of them are fully developed out, some of them are not fully developed out. And what we looked at as, you know, kind of a concept of trying to get some redevelopment in the city, maybe on some of the old lots, or maybe really only within the district that you can do duplexes in, obviously, is there a way to maybe take this type of subdividing of a duplex, marry them to that subdivide of the duplex where they can't build anything else on it, to encourage that level of, you know, $80,000 to $110,000 housing, make it affordable for people in Warrenton to come and buy that type of residence and promote that type of development. So we really had two issues that came about. We had the issue of individual citizens of the city that own half a subdivided lot that was not legally subdivided. And so part of our thing was we need to fix that and make that a legal lot. And just, you know, our thought process was make that a legal lot because you have an individual that owns that may have bought that 5-6 years ago. They were represented that it was a legal subdivided lot, you know, and try to make that legal and kind of have a finite number of these substandard lots that were sold by some developer 5 or 6 years ago. The second thing we had was lots that had attached multifamily duplex, triplex, quadplexes approved on it that have no development on it, with the idea that if we create this conditional use permit specific to that lot only and require them, if there's ever require them to record a deed restriction on the property that says if there's ever any the thing burns down or anything like that, the only way you can get outside of the yard setbacks is if you build it on the contiguous re-subdivided lot on the same footprint. So the idea was, well, maybe this issue of this development can actually, I think we call it innovative housing, affordable innovative housing, can actually spur some redevelopment on some of these duplex, quadplex type developments where people can own, you know, property, they can own this, they're restricted to only rebuild duplexes or a triplex in that particular piece of property, tie it to the deed, tie it to the conditional use permit, and this is the solution that we came up with. And it's been something we've been looking at and researching for a long time, and I gotta be honest with you, it's kind of a situation that has developed in Warrenton that's, in looking at other cities and talking to other city attorneys, there was only one other city that I saw this happen, where you had, if this was one or two, it would be much more tameable, if you will, but it's so prevalent. Most of these villas, duplexes, and I don't want to say all of them because not everybody did this, but when that development boom kind of hit, they were taking these properties and re-subdividing them via meets and bounds, not through a subdivision or re-subdivision plat approved by the city, and selling off half a lot. Well, then they think they own half a lot that's substandard under under our rules and regulations. So, you know, this was our hope that not only would it spurn development in the areas that were already approved for duplexes, but people that would want to come in, maybe there's a lot that's in the proper zoning district where a duplex is a conditional use, they could come in and apply for a conditional use and maybe take that lot, develop it, do a duplex, split it, and then, you know, get some redevelopment kind of going on some of those lots as well. Does that make sense?
Yes. And then the follow-up question would be, by substandard lot, you're saying that the lot that's created, when it's divided, is substandard because it's not big enough for a
It does not meet our,
single?
it does not meet our lot minimum requirements.
Right, but the whole lot before
Or
it was
side yard.
subdivided did meet the minimum for a duplex.
It met the minimum. What happened was, there is no lot minimum, well, I guess there is a lot minimum for 8,400 square feet for a duplex, and it's the same as single-family housing, right? So it's the exact same lot size. And so what happened was, people would develop a duplex for, you know, let me say this, let me start this way. I can't find any other city where the duplex, where you split a lot right in the middle of a duplex. Typically, the duplex is developed as part of a condominium association. The condominium association owns all the ground. They don't own the lot. For some reason, the way it kind of developed here was they created a lot, single-family residential lot or single-family duplex lot, and then they went back and subdivided it. Our code does not allow that to happen because it's an 8,400 minimum square foot lot for the duplex. 8,400 minimum square lot in that zoning district. What zoning district is it, Jack? Is it R3?
Several, yeah.
R3, where it's a conditional use, where it's allowed, where you can actually apply for a conditional use to build a duplex. They were submitting subdivision plats. I have my own theory on why they did that, is because building a condominium association and planned unit development is very expensive because you basically have to build it out, create your association, fund your association, develop your association, whereas opposed to you take a lot, 8,400 square foot, you build a duplex, and then you sell half and then you sell the other half. And it also makes, I think, economically as a developer, if you can take an 8,400 square foot lot and you can build a 1,100 square foot house, you know, split level house, you may sell that for $140,000, where if you build a duplex, you may be able to sell that for $160,000, you know, each side, $80,000 or $90,000 each side. So, and I think what happened was, you can go and you can kind of take these duplexes and you can go look and say they were approved for one building on a minimum lot size of 8,400 square feet in the subdivision plat. Then they went and did a meets and bounds description to re-subdivide that lot, which you can't do. You can't subdivide a lot that has already been approved by the city at the minimum size without coming back to the city and saying the city has to sign off on a subdivision. You know, whether it's a resub or a sub, we do that all the time. So why we got here, or how, I mean, I talked to one developer who I feel has been very honest with me, just kind of like, we did it because we could, you know? We did it because we sold them and, you know, it was a boom and, you know, whatever. But there are multiple developments where that's occurred, where really you have an individual that owns an illegally subdivided lot. And I use the word illegally, I mean, it violates state statute under Chapter 89, and it also violates our ordinance. So, and I don't know if I'm addressing your question, Teresa, I'm kind of just rambling on, so.
That does address that, but I have one more follow-up.
Sure.
So, does this allow this practice to continue, or does it just allow those that exist to be basically utilized?
And that's a great question. So if you look at it, what we've done is, the ones that have already been done, we make them legal. And they're substandard lot sizes, and if that duplex burns down, you know, they're gonna have to deal with the fact that they may build a house that is 3 feet wide because they have to meet the side yard requirements, setback requirements and all that, or they're gonna come and apply for a variance for that. Now, fortunately, at least not that I'm aware of, since these developments went in, we haven't had a fire, we haven't had a situation where two neighbors don't get along in a duplex, it burns down and they say, well, I'm not gonna connect my house to yours anymore. But what do you do with that citizen that now thinks they own their lot, but it was never approved by the city? So that's one side of it. It basically says these are all legal non-conforming lots, and we're just going to have to muddle through what happens when, because most of those, or a lot of them, are privately owned. Moving forward, because we have so many of these, subdivisions approved, which really are single-family house subdivisions with anywhere from 8,400 square feet to, 35,000 square feet lots, where they have duplexes, triplexes shown on plat maps, with a one lot with, a duplex or a triplex on it, was, well, maybe what we could do, and this is what we propose as a solution, is doing an individual lot conditional use permit that basically says, yeah, we'll let you split this only for a duplex. We'll let you split this, we'll approve it, we'll sign off on it, but you're gonna have a conditional use permit that if you get approved for a conditional use permit for a duplex and you get approved to split it for a duplex, you can never build anything else on that. You can, basically your approval, you could never build a single family house on 4,000 square foot. You could only build the one half of the duplex that would go with the other one, which is the foundational footprint that you had there before. So yeah, because there are places where there's undeveloped lots in multifamily areas. There are places that maybe a duplex would work in an R3 zone, to maybe get some redevelopment on some lots. But one of the things we learned in talking to developers is there is a market for a $90,000 home. People want to own their home at that price point. And the thought process, with the board and what we presented was, can we make this a workable solution as kind of an innovative development to say, hey, you can own this, but that's all you're ever going to be able to have is this duplex, this half connected to this other home. I know it gets very technical, so I apologize if I'm over talking it.
Well, I understood Mrs. Scott's question to begin. Maybe you answered it, but I didn't pick up on it. Their question was, we know we have the existing homes that have been built, and we know we have some lots that were approved but haven't been built. But I think the question was, are we going to also entertain yet to be platted developments this same treatment, this same
I think
provision?
realistically, if we had this development come in now, we have a section in our code for planned unit development. If you go back and you watch the videos where people are talking about these developments, they're referencing a planned unit development, but they weren't approved as a planned unit development. I don't think somebody would come in and ask for all these individual conditional use permits. I think it would be cost prohibitive to do that on a new development. What we would do if somebody came in with all these multifamilies, some of the developments that are here, we'd say this is a planned unit development, and one of the things we talked about doing was working on our planned unit development to really flush out what it should be, which is a 20-acre tract with a bunch of multifamilies on it, and it's a condominium association, and that's what it is. Could somebody come in and say, this is what I want to do? Yes, but they would have to get a conditional use permit. I think it's only R3, is it, Jack?
No,
that you
it's
can do?
any place that available.
Right, but
We're existing, so it would be duplexes available in R3, RC1, RC2.
Okay, so that's what I
C1,
thought.
C2,
So
C3.
you're talking R31. These are the places where it's even conditional, which is R31, R3, RC1, RC2, C1, C2, C3, C4. So you're not talking ag, R1 or R2. You're only talking that R3, which anticipates a higher density housing, and then the residential commercial mixed, and then the commercial. They would have to first come in and apply for a conditional use permit to say, do you even want to do a duplex, or does planning and zoning even want to consider allowing duplexes in this area, number one. And then the second thing is they would have to come in and get a separate conditional use permit. Now, I could anticipate them trying to combine them as one conditional use permit application, a second one to do the lot split. So, if they wanted to build it build it as a condominium or a planned unit development, they come in for the first conditional use permit. If they wanted to build it as, we want to sell these off as individual halves of lots or halves of houses, and I don't like to use that term, but I think that's, fairly accurate, half of a house or whatnot, they would have to then come back or at the same time say, this is what we want to do, is sell these halves, and they would have to get a conditional use permit for that. So could they come in and do that? Yes, but our hope or our thought process was, you're really talking R3. The ones we have are mainly R3, right, Jack? Okay, so you're really talking an R3 zoning district, which is a higher density, and that's what we have right now. And R3 and above, and you're talking I don't know, honestly, in looking at it, if we really understood what a planned unit development was back when the applications came in. But if the application came in, they could do this, but they would have to have 2 separate conditional use permits on the property. There'd be 2 separate reviews of it. So, if they just wanted to get duplexes and a planned unit development, that would be a conditional use. If they wanted duplexes and then split them off and sell it, that'd be a separate conditional use with a separate consideration for the Planning and Zoning Commission and the board to consider.
Well, I have 2 different scenarios that I see that this arises. The correction of the pre-existing construction, something has to happen, because otherwise those people, I don't know how they currently sell. If you and I are neighbors and we own the same duplex, I have one half, you have one half, and I want to sell my home, and the deed doesn't recognize that our lot is subdivided, and I want to sell mine, I don't know how you get that through a title company at this point.
Well, I think, Jack, if we want to spend 15 minutes talking about title company and title insurance, Jack would, I'm sure, tell you or if he wants to sum it up in one word, he's told us multiple times, he's not a big believer that title companies do an extensive look at that. How they got it done, I have no idea.
I can buy that. That's probably why so many of them got
Scott,
sold.
most of the
as
deeds,
they are.
the first word says part of a lot, and that's the problem. It's not a lot.
It's not specifically defined.
But
Which part?
they were recorded as part of a lot.
Right.
And they were bought and sold as part of lots.
So my point is, if it were truly followed up on the way it should be, that would be really difficult, I think, for a seller to get through a title company. So, but that's why I think we have to correct the existing construction. But the 2 scenarios I see, one would be there's a single orphan, undeveloped, conforming lot in an R3 subdivision, 8,400 square feet. My understanding would be, under the current circumstances, if I own that lot and I want to build a duplex, and I want to build that duplex to be just rental housing for 2 families, I own the whole thing, I could do that.
And that's legal.
And so we know that I can build a duplex on that individual lot in an R3 subdivision where all the other homes are single family, as long as the subdivision's covenants and restrictions don't prevent.
Exactly.
Okay?
Absolutely.
But the city isn't the one that administers that anyway.
Correct.
It's the subdivision association. So I can build that duplex. Right now, we don't know what the mechanism is to build that duplex if I want to build it as 2 separately platted lots, I suppose. This would create that possibility.
It would create that, in a very limited circumstance, it would create that
Right.
possibility.
So I can see where other single-family home owners of homes that were all built in, say, the 90s, with 2-car garage and swing sets and fences around the yards and all that, say, wait a minute, this is that one exception. We've got our nice homogeneous neighborhood where everything's consistent, and we're gonna throw this one exception in here, and we feel like that isn't in keeping with the environment that we wanted. So I think I'm cautious about that, number one. But the other one that I see is that we've got the guy, I have a 20-acre lot, and I say, I see what they did over here by Mosier's, and I'm assuming that's one of the developments that's an issue on. So I see what they did there, and so now I'm a developer with 20 acres, and as you said, I do the math, and I can sell, I've got these on 20 acres and they're quarter-acre lots, so I've got 80 lots to sell. Do I want to sell 80 single-family residences, or do I want to sell 100 at 120,000 or whatever, or do I want to sell 160 single-family attached residences at 90,000 each, where I'm going to maximize my revenue? Do we as a city, and maybe the aldermen do we want to encourage that? And those are the questions I'm concerned with. Because the correction of the issues we got on the already constructed buildings, or even the lots that were approved for those things, is something that I think has to be dealt with. But I don't know that in dealing with that, it's necessarily a good thing to create these other two scenarios that I've.
And I think those are, this is something that we've struggled over for quite a time, because, I mean, Jack and I working on writing this ordinance, there's no code you can copy it from, because it's really unique to the city. And I understand what you're saying is that, part of it is we want to encourage development, but we want to do it intelligently. So one of the things I think, as you were kind of talking that through, listening to it, is there may be a density issue we want to address. In looking at this as well, and we can even add to the code, we can also talk about the character and nature of a subdivision, that you have to take that into account, and leave kind of an open question that the Planning and Zoning Commission could review the aesthetics of it to say, is this consistent with the neighborhood, the development? Because I think about, the mid-century modern homes. You wouldn't want a duplex in that neighborhood that didn't have a mid-century modern feel. It'd really stick out like a sore thumb, and people would not like it. That's just one stylistic feature of a home. Neighborhoods that were built in that 50s, 60s time period, where you had this mid-century modern home, then you had this modern-looking duplex siding, everything else is brick. That may make it a little bit less. And I also think one of the things we can do is, we could parse out the scenario of the orphan lot, if you will. We could work on the language to say, do we want to try to parse that out, and also look at the situation in which try to tie it only to where these multifamilies were approved. What we really anticipate will happen will be, and I think you're right, Scott, I think under this, there are orphan lots in town. There are orphan lots in subdivisions 1, 2, 3, 4, where there's a subdivision that's been there since the 80s, and, now somebody may say, well, here's a way for me to make some money, because there is a financial incentive into doing it. But we can look on your one scenario, we could look at that situation as a density type requirement as well to add to that, the 20-acre scenario, if that's part of the concern as well, and also put some aesthetic requirements. We can put some higher kind of review or considerations for the Planning and Zoning Commission and the board to consider in that, if that's something you guys want to consider. I mean, it just seems like there's this balancing act we're trying to take into account to say, this is what people are buying or want to buy. At least talking to the developers, there's a market for that. And you want people to have home ownership, and that is their piece of home, that is what they call home. We haven't really had issues with the ones that are being developed, but we also have to anticipate what kind of issues could we have in the future. And I do think that, you're right, Scott, doing a 20-acre subdivision or a 20-acre duplex, there is a financial incentive to, and I would think I'd be lying if I said developers don't consider the financial aspect of it. That's why they get in the business.
Blind and naive.
Yes, to do that, and it's like, do we want to have a bunch of substandard lots with duplexes on it? It's a complicated issue, because I do believe, in looking at this issue, that there are developments that will get new life, where they're either completely undeveloped or they have some of these single-family attached homes by passing this, because I think a lot of those developers, developments, when we had the initial conversations, we said, if you do this, we're going to prosecute you, because you can prosecute them because this is illegal what you're doing. So I think that did scare some of that development away. And obviously the economy and, land values going down obviously had an effect as well. So, it's a complicated issue. I definitely understand that. And really, that's why we're bringing it to you guys for first impression. I mean, Jack, is there anything you want to talk about?
I'd like to add just two quick things. First thing is this would only be available in high-density areas or commercial zones. So that's one thing. And I think we have tried to address your concern, Scott, in the second half of the opening paragraph in A, where it says, prior to approving any redevelopment of any lot, the Planning and Zoning Commission and Board of Aldermen shall require that the building conform aesthetically with the surrounding homes, neighborhoods, and zoning districts, and consider whether such individual lot redevelopment will have a negative impact on the surrounding utilities, traffic conditions, and property values. So we tried, as we was making this, to address them kind of concerns, because we shared them too. If you guys have suggestions of maybe adding to that to help protect the existing subdivision, we greatly welcome any suggestions, because like Chris mentioned, when you're starting from scratch, it's hard to throw it all together.
And I had forgotten that we had put that in there, and I'm glad Jack pointed that out, because that language I wrote specifically with the idea that you could say, well, this doesn't match the aesthetics. This doesn't match these things when you consider the conditional use, because you're going to have almost like a Board of Adjustment review, an ability to say, well, we don't believe this matches the aesthetics of the surrounding houses or the neighborhood. We feel this will have a negative impact on property values. So there's written in standards to review when you consider this type of development, when you put it in. And we specifically as well titled it as an individual lot, that you're going to have to get a separate conditional use permit and advertise and do that for each lot, with the idea that if that 20-acre development comes in, we really want that to be a planned unit development, because the planned unit development talks about open spaces, common ground maintenance, anticipating the clubhouse and all that other stuff, to say, well, if you do this, you're going to have to go through one by one with each lot to do it in order to get it approved. So that was some of the thought process as well.
And that was one of the reasons why I was thinking of the larger development as an issue, because whether you're talking about a condominium development, planned unit development, whatever you want to call it, typically roads remain private and are maintained by the association. Most of the lawn maintenance, landscaping, and the aesthetics, the beautification is done through the association as well, and so you've got consistency throughout the development. If it's the other way around, where they're individually owned, I'm going to mow my own half of the yard, and you're going to mow your own half of the yard, and what I think is attractive as plantings and what you think is attractive are very likely going to be different, and you're not going to have consistency. And that doesn't mean that it's bad in a neighborhood for each house to be a little bit different, but on a large scale development like that, I think it's preferable if you know that there's consistency of maintenance, consistency of design, and those kinds of things. So that's why I'm hesitant. I won't say skeptical, but I'm certainly hesitant as we look at solving one issue that's already a pre-existing matter of crisis, not to create something that can be exploited by a developer that's just waiting for this to happen.
And there's no question about that, and that's something we talked about. Scott, one of the issues we came across when we discussed this as a staff is we can't say, there was a lot of discussion about rewarding the developers that did this, that still have lots out there, but I think when you kind of take that side about it and you just say, okay, has this development been good? We've had some time trial period of it, and it's worked out well. These developments have worked out well. The ones by the high school have been, good developments. They've been residences that people can afford and whatnot. But you're right, they're not all going to build them the same, and they're not all going to be consistent. You are right, on an 8,400 square foot lot, somebody likes grasses around their house, the other person likes trees, could be an odd mix of landscaping, design and feature. Which you would have some more control over that in a planned unit development. Part of the issue we had when we talked about the prospective looking forward piece of it was the idea of, well, we have, these kind of in situations like over by high school where there's some of the lots, they were always designated as multifamily. They've been platted as multifamily. They've been there for years and nothing's been built. It works there, so maybe we let them finish those out. But part of the problem is you really can't open it up just for them. You really have to open it up. You really have to create something that would allow any developer to do it. You can't say, well, just these ones that were done between this time and this time can have these, split lot type things. But, that's why we tried to tie it to the individual lot with the concept. There's extra engineering costs. There's extra drawing costs that you have to do, with the idea that with the hope that would it really make sense to do that over a planned unit type development, to come in. We have not had a multifamily large scale development come in since, what's the one off Highway U?
Stone.
Yeah, Stone Meadows.
Stone Meadows or Stoneview. We haven't had that come in since then. So it's not as though that has been an attractive large-scale development that we've had come in since then. But if we had somebody come in, if we had somebody come in with something like this, I would characterize, and I think Jack would characterize and say, this is a planned unit development, this is the road you have to go down. That would be how I think we'd control it on the entry point. Could they come in and say, I'm gonna do a single-family residence subdivision, and then come back and say, well, I want conditional uses to put duplexes on all these, and then come back and do individual lot conditional use duplexes on it? Yes, they could, but I don't know that would make sense to take that development that route and do it that way. I think it'd be more of like a platted subdivision or the orphan lot, is where you'd see that happen, where there is really no development at all, and they're like, well, how can we breathe some new life into this previously platted subdivision that's in R3? How can we try to get this development going or do this development? I can tell you, we tackled it for a long time, just trying to grasp and understand the reach and how prevalent this was. So I know it's a lot to put, and I'm glad, it seems like there's consensus about the ones that are already done, where they've been sold. There's some consensus that let's make those legal and just kind of deal with it and understand what's there. Those are pretty much contained in those types of developments. But moving forward, our hope was, like, I'll take Veroni Business Park, for example. There's multifamily plan for the back of that. This may spur them to do that development now because it's not cost prohibitive as much anymore. And also maybe finish out Warrior Acres with the hope that maybe that would bring some of that back. And I understand we have to anticipate how could it go wrong. I've told you guys that a million times. How could this be a bad thing? And that's something that is a concern that you guys bring up that I think is legitimate. So, like Jack said, we wrote this from scratch. So if you want us to look at some density or maybe some additional aesthetics, I wouldn't really change the aesthetic language that we put in there because I would want it somewhat vague. So you could say, well, we don't think this meets the aesthetics. I wouldn't want it to be very specific because, engineers will find ways to meet us, very specific.
You usually tell us we need to be very specific.
Well, I will tell you from a legal perspective, I would rather defend not meeting the aesthetics of the neighborhood as opposed to the same front material, the same roofing material and whatnot, because, if you got a subdivision built in the 80s, that material may not be very expensive anymore. It may be easy to do.
Should we make a motion to accept this?
Well, I think you guys got to kind of tell, this is the first time we're presenting it to you. You guys, I came to answer questions about the issue that occurred, where we're at, and to, see what thoughts or ideas you guys have about it, to see if you guys want us to look at changing it, modifying it, expanding it, or if I've just talked too much already. And we
or I somewhat anticipated there may be additional discussion. So it's not automatically scheduled for the board meeting, the next board meeting. If we decide that we're ready to move forward, it would be on the June board meeting. Just in case we needed more discussion. But one of our goals was, and I think Chris explained it, but I hope you guys picked up on it. There's so many empty lots that are sitting there with no action. And at least this way here, if someone was willing to start building on it, they've got a legal way to build that duplex and sell it and go through the process without worrying about something coming back, like technically the previous ones that did the meets and bounds did not follow the procedure. So that was one of our goals too. How do we finish out these plats that are sitting there vacant and encourage someone to move forward on them?
Well, I'll make a motion that we go ahead and vote on it, if that.
But what you're saying is that we need to approve the whole thing, or?
Well, I mean, we'll take whatever direction you guys want us to. I mean, if you want us to carve a provision out or carve a section out, then do you want to say something here? No.
Oh, I can address.
Yeah, okay, absolutely.
Having heard the discussion, my preference as an alderman would be that we would table this and reconsider the issue that Scott brought up. I think we were primarily focused on, one, addressing the problem that already existed, two, finishing out the lots. And we made the assumption that if somebody came on the 20-acre proposal, we would force them into the planned unit situation. Now, if we can't do that, then I think we need to figure out a way to prohibit what you're saying. So my preference would be, since we spent hours discussing this, is take your thoughts under consideration and go back and specifically look at that issue of a subdivision that's not plotted, that's not drawn out, to see if we can avoid that specific issue. Because we definitely do have a desire to fix what was wrong that's currently owed. We have a desire to try to make what's already planned and platted as multifamily to develop it. But I think if there's a step that we need to be concerned about, we need to think about that. And that gives Chris some time to maybe come up with some alternatives. I don't know if alternative is addressing it by aesthetics and land, because
I think one of the things we could do I think it would be a fairly simple fix, honestly, when you talk about PUD versus this, and that's the density requirement, is you make it a much lower density to be able to do this on 20 acres. So essentially you say you can only have one of these split lots within this density, and you allow a much higher density in the PUD. We've definitely learned in this that if you're going to effectuate, you take away the financial incentive. So we could look at the density requirement for the PUD to say, well, you can get 30 of these units in a PUD, but you can only do 15 here. They're going to do the 30 units because it's going to be the higher yield and the higher volume. So I think that, Alderman Ock, I think that would be a pretty simple fix, which would require us to go back and look at the PUD, put a density requirement, and then a contrasting density requirement in this particular type of development.
So I think, again, from my perspective on the board, my preference would be if you would just defer action on it so we can go back and reconsider some of those issues brought up and see if we can find good alternatives that give us some time for Chris to relook at and for us to relook at. So that would be my preference.
And I'm glad to hear Alderman Ock
say
that
Yes.
we want to take care of the people that are already somewhat held hostage to the circumstance that was not their fault. And I absolutely agree. I think planned unit developments have a much greater positive impact on the community than going the route of a large, high-density individual duplex ownership arrangement. So having said that, I would make a motion that we table consideration of this so that the Board of Aldermen and city staff can refine the proposal.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Costello, second by Mr. Deach to table this issue. Any other questions or comments? Can I ask a question? So the planned unit development would be, someone would know that if I bought into the planned unit development, I know that I'm going into a situation where there are going to be duplexes everywhere.
Yes.
To where what we're trying to avoid is, I'm in a single-family residence area, and all of a sudden I start seeing duplexes pop up. That's not what I bought into. That's the thing we're trying to avoid.
One of them.
One of them.
That's one of them. I think that is the orphan lot scenario.
Okay.
And that's something that I think, in my mind, I'm already thinking of a way to address that even making not allowed when it does, you know, I think that could be addressed with the language, but I think we can tighten that language up to address that, the orphan lot, because the orphan lot may not be a good idea. It probably is not a good idea. We could look at percentages of the neighborhood developed and whatnot. That would be a pretty simple thing. Really, the planned unit development is the condominium association. Really, the point of PUDs is higher density living with the idea that you then have larger open common ground areas that's usable to everybody. So, yeah, I think these are actually two things. I think we can figure out a way on those two things to address them that really would, you know, because like I said, you take the financial incentive out of it, they're not going to build it. So the density on the PUD versus the other one, and then looking at limiting the amount of that redevelopment in there.
Thanks for all your time you guys are spending on this. Any other questions or comments? So we'll vote on the issue of tabling this. Roll call vote?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Mr. Kohler?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
And Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to table that. And the last order of business will be the Appendix A.
I would make a motion that we table Appendix A's discussion until the question of the subchapter 405, 286 question is resolved with the Board of Aldermen.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Costello, second by Mr. Dickey to table this as well until the other issues. Any questions or comments? Because we have 45 minutes left that we can discuss that one as well.
There's a lot to talk about, trust me. I've worked at
Oh, I love it.
When I talk to them about it.
We missed you.
I apologize. I will
No,
take
that's-
so much trouble from everybody tomorrow.
That's awesome.
Could you give us the Cliff Notes?
I will work on that. It's a complicated issue.
Very good discussion, though. Any other questions or comments about tabling this one? Roll call vote?
Mr. Kohler?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Burton?
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. So at this time, we'll close the meeting and offer Jack a chance to speak.
So far, we have one variance for the next meeting for the Board of Adjustment, and there's a possibility we may have a site plan if he gets it into me, so I can get it in the paper tomorrow. So that's it.
Any other questions or comments? Entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Deach, Mrs. Scott, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks for coming out. Have a good weekend.